Hello everyone, welcome back again. My name is Jesse, and in this wonderful and exciting tutorial, we're trying to explore a very nice platform called Dagshub. So Dagshub, DAG, stands for Direct Acyclic Graphs, right? Hub. It's a platform that allows you to be able to build your data science project, to keep tracks of it, and then to do some interesting stuff. It is built on top of several open source tools, right? So in software development, most of the time you must keep track of the different versions of your software, and one of the platforms you use is GitHub, right? Everybody knows GitHub. Dagshub also is similar to GitHub, but it's mostly for data scientists, right? And the interface is almost the same. So let's explore when to use GitHub and when to use Dagshub. Okay, so the normal software development approach is that if you have different versions of your software, different versions of your code, you need to keep track of the different versions, right? And one of the powerful tools you use is to use Git. You can also use SVC or Mercurial, or any of the SVC softwares like Mercurial, but most of the time we use Git, right, to keep track of the different versions of your code. So in doing so, where do you keep the different versions? So you mostly use GitHub or GitLab or Bitbucket. So these are the different platforms that allows you to be able to do software version control or source code version control. But when you're a data scientist or you are doing any data science project, you don't only produce code, but you also produce data. You produce models and then different assets such as your artifacts and then your metrics. So how do you keep track not only of your code but also of your data and then of your model and different data science assets? That is where DVC comes inside. So DVC stands for data version control. So with DVC you can keep track of the different versions of your data, of your model, and of your asset. And with DVC you can push your data, right, to Amazon S3, you can push it to your OneDrive or your Google Drive, or you can even push it locally to your system. You can also use Git, right, because there's Git LFS, right, large file system, in which you can also use, but it's better you use DVC to do that, right, to push it to maybe S3 bucket or your drive or your something with a bigger space, right? Okay, so that is the basic understanding. So for software development, you use Git to track the versions of your code and you push it to GitHub. But if you are doing a data science project, you don't only have code, but you also have data, your model, and your different data assets. And we use DVC to keep track of them. Now, where does Dagshub come inside? So Dagshub is a platform that allows you to combine the best of Git and then DVC together, right? And they have a very nice open source tool called FastDS, right, which combines DVC and then Git to help keep track of your code, your data, and then your model, right? And then they have a very nice platform called Dagshub that allows you to be able to do all of these things together. So instead of using Git, you can use Git and then DVC separately and then push your code to Git and then to your different storage system. Or you can use FastDS, which allows you to be able to do the same thing and push it to Dagshub or to any of these things. So let's see how to use this particular tool in this wonderful tutorial. So I'll go back to Dagshub, right? Dagshub looks like GitHub, as you can see, and you create an account. So in case you don't have an account, you can just sign up here. It's free, and then you can see that it's having some very cool stuff. So this is my account already. So I'm going to create a repository just like a normal GitHub, right? And I'm going to create a new repository. I'm going to give it a very simple name. So let's call it as maybe simple tutorial. So I'm going to call it as, so you can just like GitHub. The interface looks similar to GitHub. So in case you have been using GitHub, it will be very familiar for you. So let's create a repository name. So let's call it as my say data science project, data science, or we can just give it any name. Let's give it a simple name that we can remember. So machine learning ML project, right? Let's go to ML project. Pivot. Then you can make it public or private as you want. You can also add some description. So let's call this one as, you can also add some simple description. So this is a simple project on using like something like DVC, Git, see what I did, Git, and then FastDS, right? Something like that. Okay, so that is all. You can also generate different templates and you can just add these particular ones. But let's create, you can also add a readme, right? Select a simple readme, a readme template. So let's use the default readme, and I'll click on create repository, right? Very simple. So don't worry, I think my internet is not that fast, or my browser is not fast. So in case you have any question or contribution, you can put inside the comment section below, and check our Patreon channel for more, and then the materials below for more. Okay, so you have created a simple repository, as you can see, and then with Dagshub, it gives you the option of having your files, right? Experiment, in case you have different versions of your machine learning experiment using maybe MLflow. You also have a new feature of annotation in case you want to do label annotation for your data science project, and then also having the data pipeline, which is this particular simple pipeline, right, of the different graphs. Remember, Dagshub is DAGS, direct acyclic graph, so it gives you the option of seeing all the various processes of your data, right? Very cool. So let's see, that's something very simple. Now, how do you work with it? So I'm just going to go back again to my workspace, and I'm going to install some stuff. Let's go back. So first of all, in case you don't have Dagshub, any of the tools, you just have to install it with the recommended way based on your operating system. So let's start with this. So it's going to be pip install. In case you don't have it, you can just install DVC, right, for data version control, and then to install Dagshub, right, for FastDS, just go with FastDS, right? So that's how to install it. So DVC for data version control, which is for doing this particular aspect. Git, I'm sure by now Git is already installed on the system, and then FastDS, right, which is going to be used, which we'll be using to see how to simplify stuff. Okay, that is how to install it. Now inside our project, let's go back. There's nothing here, there's only one project here, so I'm just going to go back again, and I'm going to clone this particular repository that I have. So I come back here and I click on this, and then I can now clone it, right? So you see that we have these options here. We can clone it. Let me make it smaller so that I can see. So if you check it out, you see that we have my Git, right? Very nice. It's a Git remote in case I want to clone it with Git, in case I want to clone it with an initialized DVC for data version control, or in case I want to use MLflow. So I'll copy this one from here for Git, right? That's what I'm doing. You can zip it, right? But let's copy the link, and I'll come back again to my GitHub. So Git clone, I'm going to paste in my project, right? So it's going to clone that particular repository there for us, and then you start working with it. So if you use this, if you use a Git option, you're going to have your Git initialized. If you use a DVC, you're going to have Git and DVC initialized, right? That is a basic understanding. So if I go back again into my ML project and I check it out, you can see we have my readme, only my readme, right? There's only my readme. If I go with LSLA, you can see we have my .git here, right? That means that it has already been initialized. Perfect. So let's see how to work with this. I'm going to move in some data set there and some simple code there. So let's create a simple file called scripts.py, right? And I'm going to create a simple directory called data, whereby I'll keep in track of my data. Perfect. So as I go back and I check out the tree of it, we have my data, where I'll keep my data, my readme, and then my script. So in case I have models too, I'll also make a directory for that. So let's store all our data inside here. So I'll come back again inside my repository, and I'm going to copy in my data, right? So if I come back here and I check it out again, and now we have my data set here. Perfect. So we want to write some simple code on a script, and then we will be tracking our data set, right? So let's see how to do that. As you can see, the repository, if I check it out, we only have Git already initialized. So the first step is that you must initialize this particular project with Git and with DVC. That's the first step, right? Because based on the step, we are keeping track of our code. So you just do Git initialize for this, and then DVC to initialize for the data, right? So I'll come back again to my workspace and I'll start with it. So Git init, let's initialize it again to reinitialize it. And now to work with to keep track of the data, just go with Git, just go with my DVC init, right? If I go with DVC init, now I'm going to initialize this particular repository for DVC, right, to take control of my data, or to keep track of the data. And as you can see, it was set initialize DVC project. You can now commit the changes to Git, right? So all the changes you commit to Git, right? Because you are still using Git to keep track of your code, right? And then you use DVC to keep track of your data. So I'll come back here, and you can see that check out the documentation for more. Very simple. So let's go back again. As you could see from here, we already had these particular repositories, right? Git. But now if I go back and I check it out again, and I do my LSLA, you can see now we have another repository. So these are the two new ones that has been added to this one, right? Perfect. Now let's check what is on this GitHub. So I'm going to go with cut my DVC, right? DVC, no, like there's nothing on it, right? Very simple. That is all. So we are done. We have initialized the project. Now let's write some simple code on it. I'm going to open my Sublime. Let's open my readme, my script. See what I did, and then write some simple code there. So perfect. So let's write some simple project. So let's go just a is equal to 1 plus 2. Let's do something simple, right? So print a, something like that, right? So let's do it like this option, just to print a. So that is, let's say, a simple project you have done, right? Something very simple that you are trying to do, just to explain the concept. Sorry for it being small, just to explain the concept. So I'll just go back again, and I'll come back, and then we'll try and version control that. Now we notice that we had this one already here, right? So, and you could see that the DVC was, there's nothing there again. So how do you initialize the project? So the next step is just go with Git status to see the changes you have made. These are the various things you must that is the new stuff, right? So you can just do Git status. Let me make it this way so that you see it well. So yeah, so the same place, right? The same place that we have right inside our ML project that we have initialized. Perfect, right? So as you see, when I did Git status, it's going to show me all the various things I need to keep track of. Then let's do DVC also status too. So DVC status to check for the status of the data version control, right? So you can just, the code is very similar, right? The API is very similar. It's almost the same. Perfect. And as you could see, there is no data or pipeline to track, right? Remember that DVC is for data version control, so you can see that there's nothing there. Now let's add our data set to it. So to be able to add the data, just go with DVC. Let's add the data here. So DVC add, then I'm going to go into my data folder. I want to add the data called my dataset, right? Then if I go with this, now it's going to add this particular data to be tracked, right? So that is the data that I want to track. Apologies for it being small. As you see, that that's added the data to it to be tracked. It's going to give you some information, so you can just, this is it. So we are tracking our data. Perfect. So we have done status to check the status, add to add the data. Now if I want to see the changes made right to this particular status, again I can just go back with DVC. If I go back to my place, DVC status, you can see that now it's going to tell me that it has added that particular data right to it. You can see the result, data and pipeline are up to date, right? Perfect. So the moment you just do DVC add, it creates this particular repository. This is going to be used to track the different versions of your code. Then by doing DVC add, it's going to tell Git, right, that creates this particular repository, this particular file, and specify that, okay, Git, don't track my data, right? GitHub don't track my data, right? DVC is going to track it. So if I go back here and let's check it back again, so the same place that we had LSLA, you can see that we have this particular one. So inside my data folder, moving to my data folder, you can see that now we have my DVC file, right? There is this DVC file. Very nice. So this is this new file that's created. So let's see what is on this particular DVC file. So my data.dvc, because this is it. So this is the particular part that of the data you are going to be tracking. This is the MD5 has and then the size. So this information is very useful for tracking our data, right? If there's any changes, this is very useful. Perfect. Now let's see what is on this GitHub file. What is this trying to tell us to do? So if I go back again inside the same place, so LSLA, because now it has created a Git ignore file, and let's cut this Git ignore file. So .git ignore inside my data project, and this is the name of it. So anything that is found inside the .git ignore means that Git is going to ignore it. So DVC is going to tell Git that Git ignore this particular file. I'll be tracking it. Do not track it. Right? That is the basic understanding. Now we need to make sure that this particular changes is committed to Git. So just go back again and go with Git. Add the data, right? We are going to be adding this particular file to Git. Okay, use this particular one and don't track this data set. Let's get out of this. Then go with Git, add data, then ignore, right? Git ignore file. So .git ignore. That is what we also added, and then we also want to track that particular DVC file that we had. The data DVC, my data right? So now this is going to be tracked. Perfect. Now let's move on to the next step. Now let's move on. So we have to commit our changes. So let's call it as added dataset, right? To project, something like that. Something like that. So it's going to track the entire stuff, right? So we have committed it. Now we need to just do get push, right? But what about the dataset? So how do we do that? So we can actually use Dagshub to help us with that. So now we already have our stuff here. So get status, data DVC status, right? You can see that these are the stuff there. We need to be able to push the dataset to my repository here. As you can see, the dataset is not here, right? So how do we push it there? So it's going to be very simple. Just go with my. So now let's push our dataset. So it's going to be DVC push, right? So before we push, right, there's something you have to configure. So sometimes there is something that you have to configure. If I go back here to my DVC file, right, let's check it. CD into my .dvc. It has, because it's an initialized folder, we have a config file, right? So if I should go into my config file, so cut this config, you can see it's empty, right? Now with the config, that is where we keep track of the particular remote repository that you want to use, whether we want to use Dagshub or GitHub. So I've already initialized it, so just go with my DVC remote, then you add the particular repository that you want to do, right? So add the particular origin, the particular repository, but this one will not be doing that. So DVC add remote. So this is how to add a particular remote storage. So DVC remote add origin, then you are going to specify the particular location. So it can be GitHub, it can be your Google Cloud, or you can just come back here and then you copy this particular project, right? You can just copy this particular stuff here, this one. So if you copy this one, and now you can add that particular repository to it, right? Something like this. I don't know, I think the audio was off for some time, apologies. So with the config, you can keep track of all the different configurations, and you can add a particular repository, which is going to be where you want to store your code. In our case, you are storing it inside DVC, right? You can actually do this one to add it to it. But because I've already done it, it may give some issues, but that is one of the ways of adding it, right? And then you can also specify the particular authentication. So let's go back again to the same place that we did, to what we did earlier on, right? So now let's push it. So DVC push origin, then now it's going to push the data right to Dagshub together with the code, right? You can also do get push to do the same thing. But before we push it, we have to make sure that you are configuring it well. So I'll just go back again to the same thing. And if I go back again to the data /config, it's supposed to be cut. Let's see what is there. Cut config file. It's not data but DVC. See what I'm doing. We are all learning anyway. Config, right? Config file. This is a .dvc file. If I check this one out, now it has added the URL. So in case you want to change the URL, you can just do the same thing as we did, right? So let's also specify the particular stuff you want to do. All of these commands can be available on the website. So the next one is the first one is just do DVC remote, right? You add a particular repository, then DVC, your specific credentials, the location, your particular option, whether you want to use password or stuff, right? It's already exists, that's why it's giving us that. Now just go with DVC again, remote, then my modify origin to specify your name. So origin dash local, to specify the local place, basic authentication. So basic. There's the next thing. The next one we're going to move is modify local your particular name. So the same thing. Come back again, do the same thing, but this time it's going to be local your particular user, right? The username. So this, so user, then my name. So my Dagshub name, come back this particular name here, the name that you are using here, this name, that's what you are using. So I'll just go back again and I'll pass in my name, which is JCharisTech. Right. Perfect. So we're going to add the user, and then you move on to specify the particular authentication method, right? Whether you want to use SSH, whether you want to use token based, whether you want to use password based. So DVC remote, modify Same thing, but this time I want to specify that, okay, I want you to ask me my password, right? So ask password. You can also do SSH token, can do SSH token. There are a lot you can do, not just this one. You can just do can just do password, right? As a token, you can also do SSH. If you're a fan of SSH, so password, right? Then you set it to true. But in this case, let's use as password. I prefer to add my password. That is it, right? So set it to true. Now this is what it's going to do. It's going to modify these particular ones for us. And now if I go back to the config file that we did, you're going to see the different changes. So this allows us to be able to track our repository. So if I go back again to my LA, inside my DVC file, let's go back again. So my cats file. So now we have all of this particular stuff there, right? So we have these informations there. And then in case I want to see more, if I go back again, inside this particular repository here, there is a local file. So cd into my dvc.dvc. Then we have my config local. So this config local came because we're specifying that we wanted to also keep some local stuff here. All this local stuff we are doing, you're also going to create one for us locally, right? Which is very useful. Okay, so now let's go back again and then check what is inside that file. So path, then config local. I'll check now all the information that I put there, right? Don't worry. My name, the particular authentication, and whether it's going to ask password or not. Now let's push our data. So if I go back, let's get out of here. So Git DVC status. See what you have so far, and then we just push our code. So this has been a very interesting tutorial. You have seen the various workthrough of it, but maybe in another time you just go systematically. So the next thing we do is the DVC push. So push origin or just push, right? Hopefully it doesn't fail. So it's now going to push this particular stuff to my repository here. So it's going to ask you for your password because that's what I specified, and now it's going to push that particular file there. Perfect. If I go back again to my Dagshub and I refresh this particular project, you're going to see that now it has committed the data together with the code and everything here, right? That's very nice and very simple. So we have seen how to use DVC, you have seen how to use Git. So in the next tutorial, we'll be trying to see how to use FastDS. So all those things I was doing, you could see that it's okay, but it took time, right? So we need a way to automate the entire stuff. That is where FastDS comes in, to simplify it. So if I come back here and I check it out, take some time for it to load. Perfect. So before we finish to do everything, we are still keeping track. So we have told them that okay, DVC is done with it. So the next thing we need to do is let Git also be conscious of that. So I'll go back again and do Git push, right, which I've done here. So Git push is going to ask of my Dagshub username, which is the name that we have. So JCharisTech. Then it's going to ask for the password, the same password you use for these ones, right? Perfect. And now it's going to push it there very, very fast, as you will see. Now if I come back to my Dagshub and I refresh it, you're going to see that now the code has been pushed there, the data has also been pushed there, and I can keep different tracks of it, right? So the final thing you do is always to do the Git push to commit the changes, right? So you do DVC push, Git push, DVC status, Git status, DVC add, Git add, right? Very, very interesting. But you don't do DVC commit. You can do that, but mostly I prefer to use Git to do the commit for that. So if I come back here, you can see that we have my DVC here, we have my data, and you see that you have my code. My code was not there, but you can see the changes, right? You can see that we have my data here, right? The data is being tracked. Very nice. So that is something very simple you can also do with this particular tutorial, right? So in the next tutorial, we'll be trying to see how to use FastDS to simplify our stuff, right? As you can see, it has been a long tutorial, exciting tutorial. I hope you have learned something. Apologies for how it went. We are all trying to learn something new. So thank you for watching. And as you can see, it's going to give us some data. It's like the data pipeline is going to load, going to give you some interesting information about the particular data you have. If you make changes to it, it's going to be showing all of them inside this particular place. So as you can see, that this is my data set, and then this is the actual stuff, right? Very, very cool. You can see the parts, the particular part to the particular data. Very nice. Okay, so let's end it up. So you have seen when to use Dagshub. Very, very simple. So let's move on. It has been quite a long tutorial. So thank you for watching the tutorial. In case you have any question or contribution, you can put inside the comment section below, and check our blog for the entire written tutorial. So next tutorial, we're trying to see how to use fast DS. See you in the next session. Stay blessed. Bye.